チンピラの嬢ちゃんたち、もしかして出せって言ったのか。
Hey look, it's yet another version of Josuke Higashikata. So yeah, just for a little transparency, I'm going to admit right now that I'm not all that familiar with this mobile game franchise. I mean, for one thing, I've never played it and just know that it's a tactical RPG with a gacha, which I just don't have the time or money to invest in, as my poor foolish soul has already sold itself to the FGO gods and their X-tier waifus. That said, I don't think any anime adaptation should require a viewer to know all of the source material in and out. Sure, knowing it would help, like with the Neptunia anime, which was in many ways a very heavily abridged version of several games in that franchise, but it was still a solid enough anime on its own. And with all the advertisements I saw for this during my little vacation to Japan, by the way, I got some good stuff while I was there, I would at least hope they're a little normie friendly. With that said, let's just get right into reviewing the first 2 episodes of Blue Archive. The first episode opened with actually the one thing that I do know about this franchise pretty well, this character. Yeah, I won't spoil anything, even though just looking at her, some of the twists are pretty damn obvious, but I will admit that when I stumbled upon this character, I was hooked by her very interesting and pretty tragic backstory. Granted, that wasn't the main reason I looked up this character, but still, what I did find interested me to the point that it is part of the reason I decided to start reviewing the show right now. Anyway, this sexy yet terrifying vixen seemingly homered someone, signifying the end to this world line, but also the start of a new one where different paths could be taken. On that note, all of this was being narrated by this girl who, yes, has the voice of Lala from Star Twinkle. And she would be far from the only pretty cure VA in the show, as we were then introduced to our main girl of the show, Shiroko, whose VA also played Homare, aka Cure PTSD, which, oh boy, that's gonna have some dark connotations later. But yeah, right off the bat, I'll say I really do like the designs of these characters. I mean, the cat ears are obvious wins, but the blazer uniforms are also really cute, with each of our main girls having little touches that reflect their personalities. For instance, Shiroko's scarf was both fashionable, especially if you're a fan of Kamen Rider, and very practical, especially when trying to stay warm during her morning bike ride, which she might really need considering its length. You see, Rio, it could be a lot worse. Along the way, we also got little bits of world building, like seeing how this world was half apocalyptic, as well as half furry, with our main girls just being girls with cat ears, but also they were amongst some anthros and even some normal animals.
The answer is don't think about it.
Yeah, it's in moments like this where some newcomers to this franchise might have a little difficult time really getting into it when there's so many details all over the place, but I'm willing to let it pass and just see how things play out, especially if I can listen to some of this great music. I just love how calming it actually is. Along the way, we also got little vignettes to give us a little bit of an idea of each of the personalities of our main girls. Most notably, Seika, who, in spite of putting up a stoic front, we could see that she enjoyed junk food just like all of us. Their personalities could also be reflected in the colors of their halos, which again, as a noob, I have no context for, but I do know my color association. Thus, you could say that light blue represents Shiroko's more chill and easygoing nature. In opposition, Ayane's red halo hinted at her being surprisingly assertive, especially when it came to her obsession with the latest tech. Hoshino's purple halo likely represented her position as the group leader, as it is a color associated with royalty, as well as mystery. And coincidentally, it also matched up with one of her previous roles. And Nonomi's green halo could represent harmony and fertility, as well as, well...
Here comes the money!
Here we go, money.
Let me guess, you're using some of that good gacha money, aren't ya? They were all members of their school Abydos' foreclosure task force, which, as the name suggested, meant that they were the only ones keeping the lights on in this school by getting some massive loans that were putting them in some pretty heavy debts. They were also clearly the only students in their school, so yeah, pretty much the very definition of underdogs. Still, I guess that would also technically make them like the student council of their school, which in this world took the whole trope of the almighty student council to its logical extreme by having one general council basically be the leaders of this whole damn city. However, their president was MIA, creating a power vacuum between the consuls of all the different schools. So yeah, now we have the basic premise of this show: cute cat girls duking it out to become the Highlander of all of the student consuls, so yeah, a very anime plot to say the least. No, but wait, there was also that guy from the beginning of the episode. Hey look, it's every whale who gets into gacha games. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna buy some more Apple cards. They're on discount, okay? Yeah, without even looking it up, I could just tell that Mr. Generic here was meant to be the player character of the game. You know, the producer, the admiral, or in this case, the sensei. He claimed to represent the aforementioned general console and was there to help the girls get out of their depths. Obviously, he wasn't meant to have that much of a personality or much of a standout design as the player, or rather in this case, the viewer's surrogate, but he did have a pretty handy little best girl in his pocket. You know, you would act as a good leader to this hodgepodge team of precures. On that note, this led into our first battle of the series, with the Foreclosure Task Force taking on a group of obvious episode 1 jobbers. Though they didn't do it with their fists or chases, but rather guns. Yeah, this show was basically Team Fortress, the anime, with all of our main characters fulfilling different roles. From Nonomi as the heavy, Serika as the sniper, to Shiroko as the vanguard. Though don't worry, they didn't kill anyone, instead just defeated them through embarrassment. Again, noob to this franchise, don't ask me anything. Anyway, they managed to achieve victory in a rather impressively animated sequence, with Shiroko being the obvious MVP, all the while listening to orders from the sensei on his little milky pad, which I feel is meant to represent something. For this first episode, the opening theme acted as its closer, which, yeah, it really does deserve all the praise it's gotten online so far, having some really chill yet pretty exciting tunes, sung by the VAs of the Foreclosure Task Force, and also had some amazing visuals that subtly foreshadowed some future events, not really spoiling anything, unless you really insist on pausing every moment to overanalyze it. Interestingly enough, the second episode seemed to open in the previous timeline and revealed how Sensei originally came upon the semi-Apple product placement with a completely different team. Hey, I was kidding about the whole Milky Pad thing. I didn't actually expect to see Lala here. Also a little bit of Fujiwara by the looks of it. But yeah, the girl on the tablet was named Arona, and again, without even playing the game, I could tell that she was the main interface for it, kind of like Da Vinci and FGO, and apparently only Sensei can operate her because, I don't know, maybe everyone in this world just isn't that much into gachas. Anyway, the episode proper opened with our leads dealing with the jobber helmets again, and yet, even though it seemed like it was an easy win, the resident Tsundere wasn't gelling well with the sensei. And this is why there are no male members in the K-On! Club. Azinyan scared them all off. We also got a little more world building, learning about how the school got into such disarray. As it turned out, some unexplained sandstorms had buried much of the city, as we had seen in the previous episode, which also happened to include their school's general area. Obviously it was still standing, but it was also left in a dead area and cut off from many resources, and made it understandably unattractive to most students and banks who could provide some less shady loans than the obvious loan sharks that the girls were dealing with. And I like this kind of world building, as it is stuff that we were able to pick up on in the previous episode, and are now just getting clarification for it, rather than being forcibly spoon-fed to us. Granted, I do kind of find some of Shiroko and Sensei's exposition from that episode to be a little redundant, as it does end up being reiterated here, but it's fine, as we did need at least a little explanation so that the viewer wouldn't be completely left in the dark when watching this from week to week, which I could experience during my trip to Japan. I would still question how a city could still be functional with much of it being buried in sand, but suspension of disbelief and all that. Anyway, with their main conflict established, Sensei was all in on helping these girls, even if one of them was against it. Yeah, if I had to complain about anything with these first 2 episodes, it would be how predictable this episode plot was, as it is mostly just based around Serika being a tsundere, one of the most overplayed tropes in all of anime. Now don't get me wrong, I don't dislike this character in any way, but they just didn't do much with her that we haven't already seen before. Regardless, to figure out what her issues with Sensei were, they decided to tailor her to her part-time job at a ramen restaurant. Interestingly enough, the owner was voiced by, I think, a popular streamer of this game, which is cool for him, as the dog seems like an interesting character who managed to pick up on Serika's issues. And hey, I'll take it over an overly predictable PewDiePie cameo. Later, after a little talk with Shiroko to just kind of ease up on Sensei, we of course needed the tsundere to be in danger to completely win her over, so she was kidnapped by the helmet jobbers. When they learned about her kidnapping the next day, Sensei asked Arona to help find her, who in turn I think just used her Find My app to track Serika's phone. Hooray! Apple saves the day again. This led into yet another awesome action sequence where Ayane managed to not only find, but also drive a freaking buggy in the desert. Granted, it also did help to establish what else she could contribute to this team rather than just being the supplier, which, while an important role, wasn't quite as impressive as everyone else. Hell, even though this was technically Serika's episode, I would actually call her the MVP of this battle. But yeah, Serika also had her moment by playing along with Sensei's plan and then went all tsundere and yada yada yada. After the credits, we also learned who had hired the jobbers. Oh come on, you're just one off from being nice. Said credits featured an ending sequence that I would actually say is just about as good as the opening, with some really calming music and very fluid animation, just highlighting the everyday life of the foreclosure task force. And oh, I think we discovered why Serika was at Sensei's neck throughout this whole episode. She got Wachowski'd. This was a solid start to a new series, especially for those who know next to nothing about the game franchise. It exposits just enough to keep the story moving, but also doesn't keep us totally in the dark to the point that we're left asking questions from week to week, other than who's the best girl, which again, the answer to that is obvious. And while the second episode did have a slightly weaker and more predictable plot, it still did its job of really letting us get to know this little task force of indebted students. For any adaptation, it is a little tricky to satisfy both the established fan base and any noobs to it. From the response I've seen online, it does seem like it succeeded with the former, and as for the latter, I do think it at least succeeded, at least with me. These first 2 episodes had some good world building and interesting characters that has got me interested in learning more about this post-apocalyptic and half-furry world. The Foreclosure Task Force in particular are a charming bunch. Yeah, some of them kind of fall into the usual anime tropes, which did kind of hold back Serika's episode when we've already done the whole tsundere thing many times before, but it doesn't make them dislikable, and in the case of Hoshino, there's clearly a lot more to this sleepyhead, and I'm looking forward to seeing her and the other girls in Spotlight episodes too. Meanwhile, Shiroko is just a badass who certainly earned her position as the poster girl for this franchise. Moreover, I just like how each member of this team have a unique role to fulfill, which allows for some really well animated action sequences, which end up being very dynamic when all of the characters have something to contribute. Sensei was also fine enough character. Yeah, he's a little bland, though this is justified by him being the actual player character of the original game, so he is supposed to be the everyman, and hey, at least he is active in trying to get to know his students, and his antics with Serika were at least pretty funny. And hey, as an FGO fan, I can say he's at least a little better than the anime version of Gudao, who's only really interesting when he's confused or written by Rio. But yeah, overall, this is a solid start to the series that I'm looking forward to covering. With an interesting world, some great animation, and fantastic music, especially the opening and ending, these girls might be in depth, but at least they're using the show's budget well. And yes, I am back from my little 2-week vacation in Japan, which means I do have a little catching up to do. we'll try to pump out the wonderful Precure shorts reviews as soon as we can, which shouldn't be that hard, as we don't have that much to say anyway, and maybe we'll try to do a double or triple review of Boom Butcher when we can. So, look forward to it. Until then, though, farewell for now, my friends. And just in case you're wondering what sort of souvenirs I got during my little trip, I managed to get this for a friend who's really into happy discharge, as well as this from a Conan 4D show. That's so damn cool.